Sometimes I'm asked, Theorywise, if you had to change or add something to old school RuneScape, what would it be? And for the longest time, I'd say a reworked skill, making smithing less irrelevant, making agility more fun to train, or reconsider endgame itemization altogether. And I think all of those things are valid. But the more I ponder the question, the deeper into the endgame I go, I realize that there is actually one thing I would do before everything I mentioned prior. I'd add a grouping system. Saying that should trigger one of two responses from the most fervent OSRS player. First, they may say that the game already has a grouping system, and second, they may say, no changes, no adjustments, it's fine how it is. And you know what? Okay, I respect both of these perspectives, but I politely disagree, so give me a bit of time to explain why, and let me try and convince you otherwise. But before I do, I want to talk about friction in game design. What is it? Why is it? And how is it? Friction is a set amount of obstacles or inconveniences that slow a player's progression. It paces their journey and creates a greater satisfaction. It's also a challenging balance. Friction is as good as it isn't. There are games with too much friction and those with not enough. It can be something as simple as a quest requirement to deeper systems, such as the progression of movement in OSRS, starting at a snail's pace to eventually learn teleportation spells, crafting portal rooms, and making the world that was once a chore to navigate feel like it's bending to your will. It's really cool and satisfying to do that. Something I've said at multiple points on this channel is, if you have too much friction, then nothing moves. Players stay still, get burnt out, and never engage. But if you have too little friction, then players never connect to begin with. Finding a balance to a game's friction is part of old school RuneScape's success, maybe even the most impressive element of it. How did the developers manage to create an active, curated sandbox MMO that demands players invest 1,000 hours of their life just to complete quests and maybe some late mid-game content? For most MMOs, 1,000 hours is burnout and waiting for a new patch. For RuneScape, it's breakfast. And yet, RuneScape is growing, and other MMOs certainly aren't, at least not right now. OSRS is so grindy, so monotonous at times, full of inconveniences and frustrations, yet still manages to create a unique balance of friction. But that didn't happen overnight, and it's still a process being adjusted every few months. Just look at the most recent batch of new player improvements. Look at all this amazing content we've gotten for the early and mid-game over the past 2 years, from Varlamore to Scurious. Hell, look at the changes to the UX, the addition to each skill's info panel, and more. Clearly, Jagex sees a value in sharpening the user experience of the game to make it less of a detour to a wiki and more a process of engagement with the world. Less time on a second monitor and more time in the game. The results speak for themselves. The player base has grown enormously over the past 2 years, from an average of around 90,000 concurrent players in 2023 to over 135,000 in 2025. And that's just concurrent players. Peak numbers have increased by around 30 to 40% too. It wouldn't be far-fetched to suggest that this success is as a result of being able to capture new players and keep them for longer. A bit more guidance and explanation goes a long way to selling the game's friction as a point of mystery and charm rather than a spike trap to fall into. One of the most exciting points to reach in OSRS is, for many, the PVM, the bossing, the ability to do mechanics and see depth. Clearly, Jagex realizes this with how amazing of an encounter Scurious is, and how early in the game it can be done by players. Show the newest user what the endgame could look like for them, and they will likely stick around to try and see it. That way, they have a long-form MMO to call a home, and exciting content that breaks up the grind. It's a win-win. But there's a problem. One I would fix if I could implement these changes myself, but I have no way of learning to program. is what I would have said if I didn't use boot.dev, the sponsor of this video and the first sponsor that I've ever had. So while I know people usually skip sponsors, please stick around and show them some love for being as kind as they are. But what is boot.dev anyway? Well, imagine turning a RuneScape grind into a career grind. Boot.dev teaches some of the most valuable skills in today's market. Software development. You'll learn Python, SQL, and Go by building real projects that you own, all while doing what you already do in your favorite MMO, getting XP, leveling up, and earning achievements. Better yet, all of the content is free to read and watch, meaning you can always check it out before committing to a subscription to gain access to the interactive elements. Instead of hoarding tens of millions of GP in-game, you may earn tens of thousands of dollars to hoard in your bank account instead, considering the starting salary for a backend developer is over $100,000 in the US. If this sounds appealing, consider signing up with a free demo of any course. Go to boot.dev and use my code TheorywiseOS for 25% off the entire first year on the annual plan. The QR code is on screen, or just follow the link in the description. Now, back to the video. Oldschool RuneScape is an MMO, and it does communality better than most, but it also has group content, even if it's sporadic. There are raids, 2 of the 3 being far more approachable in a group. There are certain bosses like Nex and Yama that are intended to be done with multiple players, and even most recently, there is the early to mid-game Royal Titans. But that might be the problem. If most of the game is solo in a shared overworld, group content becomes a harder sell, and the friction that group content already has as group content is external to the friction of it as a boss, something in-game. What I mean by this is PVM in OSRS is already full of friction, from spending supplies hoping for a unique drop to going dry. Group content adds additional pressure on top of that by putting you in the position of reliance and influence. Your mistakes can ruin someone else's time with the encounter. So not only is there the solo pressure, there's also a broader social one too. So this content already has more friction than the average solo boss. And that's made arguably unbearable by the fact that there is external friction on top of all of that. The inability to find a group to meet players to learn the content. Many of the game's best PVMers always cite the Theater of Blood, the second raid, as some of the best bossing the game has to offer. But the reality is that it's the least popular raid, not because it's bad, but because it's difficult and group-oriented, meaning that investing so much time in creating another raid of its high-quality standard is an investment that is a difficult sell for Jagex. Studios are less likely to create content that isn't engaged with as much, especially if it hits the demographics they're intending. Which is why the follow-up, TOA, is far more approachable and solvable. A proper grouping system, and we'll discuss what that looks like later, alleviates some of this external friction and makes this kind of challenging endgame content easier to pursue. New players are less likely to be scared of it. I think it's inexcusable that World of Warcraft in 2004 has a better grouping system than Oldschool RuneScape, and as someone that came from WoW, the more group content that is added to OSRS, the more important it is to add something standardized to the game. Currently, the methods of grouping are decentralized. In Chambers of Xeric, there's a board outside the raid that requires an invite to a friends channel. Note, no other group content requires this, so that alone is bizarre and inconsistent. When you figured out how to do that, then you can try and find and invite people. Oh, there's no one here. That's because these boards are world-specific. You need to be on the correct world. And when you are, you still likely won't find anyone, and there's no way to engage with them by saying, hey, I'm new, I'm a learner. And if you do, why should they teach you? This is problematic. I can speak from my experience. Learning Chambers of Xeric was likely the single most frustrating experience in the entire game for me. And that is in no small part due to that secondary and external pressure I outlined earlier. To be clear, I love group content. It's what kept me playing WoW far past Blizzard gutting everything else. I love it in the modern retail version, and I actively did the most difficult mythic raiding for the better part of a decade. And I loved it in Classic, with overworld pickups being formed between random players to take down a quest boss or an elite encampment. It's all great. And that's due to the game's intuitive and simple grouping mechanics that facilitate that kind of stuff. So as a fan, I was really excited to see what RuneScape could do with the raids paradigm. I didn't know that Oldschool RuneScape's take would be not having a take. Instead, you do the Destiny 2 thing and have to join player-made discords, and shout out to We Do Raids because they make a difficult situation better. Anyway, I joined the Discord, spent around 20 minutes setting up, and then had to navigate like 50 different channels to figure out how to even do anything. Once that was done, I had to essentially convince people to do learners, because generally, learners require more patience and management. These runs are done on certain days or at certain times, and I couldn't find anything that matched my schedule. I resorted to cold calling people over and over until I finally found 2 individuals willing to spend potentially hours teaching me the raid. Worse yet, I made the questionable decision of trying to learn the raid as a mage skipper, the hardest role on the final boss in trios. I did this because I wanted an easier time finding groups in the future. It's like being a tank or healer in World of Warcraft. You may enjoy the role, but you also enjoy the demand the role comes with. Anyway, I spent hours in this raid for multiple days, and this includes some learner runs with people I convinced to help me in the clan too. And finally, after hours, I kind of got it. You see, Olm, the final boss, is insanely unintuitive because the methods through which you do the encounter are mostly emergent. They weren't explicitly intended. Like my role as the mage skipper, I'm pivoting the boss head through meticulous positioning to prevent him from casting certain attacks. And the only way to do this properly is through internally counting and looking for subtle tells in his animation. It's very obtuse and certainly exposes this content as the first of its kind, older, before Oldschool RuneScape evolved its PVM in the Theater of Blood and the bosses that followed. As I became more confident in mage skipping, I began to form my own groups in the Discord and things became a lot smoother. But that doesn't mean everything preceding it was good. I don't look back fondly at that time. It was intense in a bad way. It's not fun to be clueless in an alien environment and risking your social credibility by effectively wasting other people's time and needing to do all of that before even playing the damn game. Now, I'm thoroughly in the endgame. The content that is left for me is by and large group-driven. Next, TOB, and some of the challenges like Inferno and Colosseum. Once again, I'm faced with the reality that the only way for me to continue my progression outside of the wave-based challenges I mentioned is throwing myself headfirst into Discord again, cold calling and messaging, hoping that I find people willing to sacrifice their time and resources to deal with a learner, and hopefully I can learn fast enough. Unfortunately, I don't really want to right now. I was excited to hop into the Chambers of Xeric because it was the first group content I did in the game, and after overcoming all that I outlined before, I have come to enjoy it. It's chill, but now that I must crawl over that same barbed wire fence again, I find myself logging off. It's demotivating knowing that I need to have absolutely no fun for days and days and days until I am more confident in forming my own groups, and that is in part because of every step required prior to actually doing the content. Infuriating isn't the word, demotivating and tiresome is a better descriptor. That's why an actual grouping system would do wonders. If I, someone who has spent over a decade in high-pressure group environments in WoW, have burnt out of RuneScape's system, or lack thereof, imagine someone who hasn't had that experience. It's no wonder grouping content isn't grabbing the amount of players solo content is. It's friction on friction on friction until the person doing it feels stationary, stuck. But that's just one part of the problem. The second is, how would a grouping system even work? Do we make billboards around the game world? Do we make those that exist in the raid space cross-server? No to all of that. I think the external friction of finding a group should be alleviated as much as humanly possible without jeopardizing the integrity of the content. So simple, curated searches and group creation without creating a randomized system that plops people into groups together. For as much as I criticize WoW on this channel, and I do that a lot, Blizzard has cracked the code with an amazing grouping system. Some WoW players complain, but those are generally people unhappy with being declined from groups and not having the foresight to create their own. The system is intuitive, simple, cross-server, and approachable. There has never been a piece of content that is intended for groups that I wouldn't confidently make a group for through that system. The reason its presence is so important is because WoW is driven by group content. All the most challenging things are group-centric. OSRS isn't like that, but over time, more and more group content is added without a single standardized system to hold it all together. Considering RuneScape already requires more from its players as a result of the grind matched with the resource economy, there is, to me, as great an impetus to add a proper grouping system. While it doesn't have the amount of group content, RuneScape has as much relevant group content at any given time as WoW does, due to WoW's seasonal model. A great system that allows players to curate a party is free real estate. And this is how I envision it. Quick heads up, I am not a UX or UI designer. My Photoshop skills are problematic, to say the least, so picture the following images in a cleaner, cohesive way in your mind. Anyway, the goal for grouping is to create a system with as little friction as possible, as opposed to most OSRS content that relies on a level of friction to create pacing, value, and a sense of achievement. Group content already has all of that without the need to add more by creating inconvenient and frustrating systems to begin doing it. You already have more pressure to perform as a result of having others rely on you. You already need to find other players of a similar skill level. You already need to invest more resources to succeed, and so on and so on. A grouping mechanism alleviates the preceding moments to create a smoother transition to actually, doing the content, playing the game. Imagine this, you log into the game and you notice that your minimap has a brand new orb attached to it. When clicked, you open up a grouping interface rather than needing to navigate through 7 menus. I figured, why not attach it to a visible portion of your game without obscuring anything in the process? Now that we have opened up the grouping interface, you pick a content type. Raids, pugs for small group bossing such as Nex, and miscellaneous to allow for custom group searches like, for example, help with the Shield of Arav quest. Now you don't need to search online for a clan chat name that requires you to message people individually and hope they help you with a quest. You could just click this button and find individuals kind enough to help. But for now, we need to find a Chambers of Xeric group. Let's do that. We click on Raids and enter the Raids submenu, from which we pick Chambers of Xeric, and here we are, a list of players currently looking for a group. In the game, it'd likely be condensed and longer with a scroll bar and a search bar. Players are divided by the kind of raid they're doing. Our learner here is based in the UK and might not be using guides. If we click his note, then we can read the custom message written by them. We can do this for every tier of player and every listing. But what if you're looking for a specific run? Well, search bar for word culling, but also filter. You can determine whether you want to find normal runs or challenge mode runs for Chambers of Xeric and even set a preferred group size. But we're an experienced player, not pros, but we have a few hundred clears under our belt. So let's go ahead and apply to this guy's party. Click, and now a perspective shift. We are the lister, the experienced player looking for players. Since this interface is cross-server, you are very likely to receive applicants quickly. And here's a list. This Theorywise guy seems kinda cool. Let's see what he has to say. Okay, clearly he wants an invite. But before we do, we can investigate his stats and inventory to see if he's ready for the challenge. Stats seem good, and so does his gear. He even has thralls he'll probably forget to use. Let's invite him. Now we have the expanded grouping interface. We also needed a third, so we got Frank in there too. Okay, we have our group. All that our leader needs to do is enter the raid and start. Easy as. And you can do this from anywhere. You can find a group while fishing, you can find one while outside the raid. Any world, any place, any activity allows you to use the grouping interface to facilitate seamless matchmaking that isn't random. You aren't waiting in a queue until you're paired with random players. This retains player agency, gives you the ability to curate who you invite and why. all the while standardizing the system, making it more approachable, and giving methods of finding like-minded players for content that otherwise had no way of teaming up, such as Nex, Yama, and Royal Titans. And the best part? You do it all in-game. You don't need to get verified by multiple Discords. It's all right here. No second monitor required. Finally, I would also add an additional invite option under the player right-click menu. This way, you don't need to type out their names or whatever else. Just click invite, get a small pop-up asking what you want to invite them to, and if it's a group, you will be able to see it either from the main menu element or even as a pop-up on the side like this. A great grouping system comes at no detriment to the game, in my opinion. The game doesn't suddenly become less old school when given the conveniences that are standard in every game, even those preceding old school itself. And games that don't have that, such as Destiny 2, suffered. Players didn't enjoy it, and the content saw major dips in player engagement. When it comes to retaining old school as old school, I am always a proponent of friction that works, that which enhances the experience of playing RuneScape. After all, that is the core of what makes older MMOs still relevant, the collective realization that not filing down the jagged edges creates better experiences, ironically. To me, the current lack of solution doesn't enhance anything. It actively discourages players from trying some of the best content in the entire game at no benefit to the actual game. TOA surpassed TOB in clears mere months after its release. That's not just because it can be done earlier, but because it is done solo. There is a place in OSRS for group content. The endgame players constantly advocate for more role-driven releases like the Theater of Blood, and to this day consider it some of the best PVM. But it simply isn't an investment that Jagex can constantly make when there's the understanding that there is a huge demographic of even endgame players that won't ever touch it, those who would play a solo boss. The solution isn't just to only make solo bosses. I don't think this is a problem of group content as a concept. It is an issue of external friction preventing engagement. Eventually, OSRS will get its fourth raid, and I'm afraid that it will either be another permanently scaling system like TOA, where it progressively becomes more monotonous and tedious the better your gear is, or becomes another TOB, where the only people doing it are those who punch through the foot-thick brick wall of managing external discords and social dynamics. We all know that it doesn't need to be this hard. There's a very clear reason why all the most popular plugins solve for points of friction that are deemed unnecessary. We see Jagex adopting certain plugins into their base client and how that will only become more popular when they release their new client. Plugins offer more conveniences and arguably smooth out the edges of so many things in OSRS. An in-game grouping system does not destroy old school any more than RuneLite tracking farm cycles, solving every puzzle in the entire game for you, or outlining clickable objects and hotspots. I actually like that parallel. A lack of grouping system is kind of like this, an easy-to-miss agility obstacle or a borderline invisible fishing hotspot. And everybody knows what the player base did all those years ago to fix this friction. They added a highlight. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Boo.dev for the sponsorship. If you want to check them out, feel free to click the link in the description. Finally, a massive thank you to all my channel members who continue to support this project. I'll see you next time.